What's up, everybody? Welcome to another great Saturday in College Football Nation. We have a huge matchup. I'm wearing the A, Roll Tide. We'll get into that and so much more here on the CFB DFS Masterminds. Welcome to the Win Daily College Football DFS breakdown for the Week 5 slate here. First weekend, well, last weekend in September, but first real big weekend of some huge matchups that will really dictate the 12 teams that get into the playoffs. I'm Dave Gloeckner. This is Joel Schreck, and we're here to break it down and talk a little bit about last week, but also get into this huge 13-game slate today. Welcome, Joel. What's up, bud?
That's fun. I'm excited to be into the swing of things in this college season. We know what these teams are, how they operate, who gets the targets, who gets the shares of the offense, and what kind of defenses we're up against. So we have the data and the information. As you said, it's a big 13-game slate, so there's a lot of spots to dive into. I think what's really unique about this week is, some of the past weeks already this year, we've been very clear about, hey, there's some clear game script spots that we want to target, right? These are the clear spots of the highest scoring games. There's a few, good spots to target this week, but it's not as clear as past weeks where it's like, this is the game to be in. So it'll be interesting to break down this week the matchups we have and where we want to find our exposure.
Absolutely. And thanks, Warren, checking in. As always, he's going to give us some of his plays as well, which we always love to share with that. So thanks, Warren. And Zach, yeah, man, regular. I love it. We're here every Saturday morning. We'll keep it rolling. There's money to be won, like Joel said. Let me just recap a little bit of last week because, as we know, I had a pretty good week. I think Joel did as well. Really, the key to last week was, hitting two key games. Clemson was huge for people. Whether Club Nick, got you there or not, Maffa was big. But the other one was Riley Leonard out in Notre Dame. You roll him naked. He went 38 points. Everybody with a big cash ticket had him, and most had him with King. And King and Rutherford together paired well against Louisville with Ja'Cory Brooks. And we knew Brooks at a low price was going to blow up. So we had a lot of those in play, Joel. I mean, I think for the most part, we hit Scatterbo was huge last week too. We did like him. So a lot of green screens. I think, what it's teaching us, I was looking at it in hindsight. Last week was not the highest scoring week that we've typically seen. Some people would like 13s and 16s in their lineups won. 216 was the highest in one contest, 219 in the big 50K to first. We usually see 240s. So it was just one of those weeks. You're right. The game scripts were a little different than we thought, but it was still out there. We had a lot of good stuff.
And another thing to note about that was also the pricing, right? Sometimes when they price the big studs up so high, the only way to afford them is you have to hit on someone in the 3K range. And not every week does the 3K range player go above 15 points. So some of that is kind of going to be in play. And that's going to be the big debate this week. If you're playing this week, I think the average player is probably going to be more balanced this week. And so there's probably some ownership advantage to going stars and scrubs, but you got to hit on that, right? And it's really hard. The challenge is hitting on those scrubs, because if you go stars and scrubs and miss on the scrubs, you're going to lose. So that's the challenge. That's the recipe for finding success. We'll dive into all the games and break it down with you to find where those diamonds in the rough are today. So I'll pull up my screen, and we'll start with the first game on the docket here, which is Kentucky and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a team everyone's talking about. Ole Miss looks really good. They're always really good on offense. We know that. I think their defense looks improved. I think this would make them a really legitimate contender because they're not just an offensive team anymore. The challenge with Ole Miss today is these guys are priced up. If you're going to play them, you got to pay for them, and you need to hit a really big number. I mean, paying 9.8 for Jackson Dart. Listen, he's one of the best quarterbacks. There's no question about it. But can you find equal or similar production for a lower rate? I think probably. So I won't be overly exposed just because of the price. I'd be more interested in Parrish, who at 6,800, he has a lot of touchdowns this year. They find he gets in the end zone at 6,800. I think he can find his way to the end zone once or twice and then easily hit. There's a lot to like about Trey Harris. He's one of the best receivers in the country. 9,100 is a lot. If you can afford him in your lineup, play it. It's a great matchup. He's going to score a lot of points. But the question here becomes, are you better off finding some receivers in the 7K range and having a more balanced lineup than going all up to Harris? That's a decision you got to make around roster construction. I'd also be interested in Wells, who's the second receiver there. But for the most part, I'm not going to be overly exposed, mainly because of the pricing. And then on the Kentucky side, the only two guys to mention are Dane Key, their top receiver, 4,600. He's affordable. And I'm not even going to bother trying to butcher his name. Sumo Carnaby, the running back on Kentucky. He's the number one guy. Probably not the ideal matchup, but at under 5K, I could see him getting there as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit on everything, and the key to this is twofold to how you want to break this game down. We're looking at a total of 52, so that's probably on the top third of the slate. We have some 60s and high 50s, so it's an enticing total, and it's one that you might want to get in. But I think you're going to get in here light. You're going to play ones and twos in this one. I think if you're going to play Dart, you can't afford Dart and Harris. You're going to have like a dumpster fire at the back end. So it's one or the other, in my opinion. Which one do you want more? And for me, I'm going to lean if I do anything, I'm going to lean Dart more than Harris today. I think I can find some other receivers out there. I think quarterback's a tricky slate. There are some good ones, don't get me wrong, but I probably favor him more. I'm going to play both. I'm going to play a little each, but I'm not going to play heavy in this game. And I think Dart will be my more preferred play out of them due to his ability to run the ball too.
Question: will you play Dart solo, or will you play him with maybe even the second receiver, Wells?
Yeah, I'll play him with Wells and solo. I'll do a little both. Like I said, looking last week, even looking the week before, we haven't had a lot of true game stacks take down these slates. So, and with 13 games in play and a lot of different varieties out there and high pricing, I think I'll be more in tune to him and Wells or him by himself.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. All right. Let's look at this Baylor BYU game. For the most part, my original reaction was I'm not that interested. However, due to pricing, I've changed my tune a little bit on Baylor. I think if you're looking for some value plays, there's a couple spots you can find on the Baylor side. I'm going to start with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. If you just look back at BYU, they've had a few quarterbacks who kind of have some successful games running on them. Sawyer, Baylor likes to have their quarterbacks run the ball. I think there's a potential where you can get a rushing score and 50 to 80 yards rushing at Robertson. If he just throws for 150 and another score or two, now you got a ceiling game at 5,500. He's really too cheap for the upside he possesses, especially knowing that BYU has given up some yards on the ground to quarterbacks. So I'm going to start there as a value play. But the second one's Dominic Richardson at 3,100. He's almost nearly minimum priced. He's the top guy in this backfield. So listen, this BYU run defense is good. This isn't a spot that I'm looking to target. But if you're telling me I can get the number one running back on a Baylor team at home at 3,100, who's probably going to get you 15 carries, if he falls into the end zone, he's easily going to hit value at 3,100. So keep your eye on Richardson. I just think it's a mispricing at 3,100. He's a way for you to find some value in your lineup.
Well, so good point. I think where I like you're landing with Sawyer Robertson is, it looks like Daquan Finn has fallen out of favor there. He suited up last week, even though it was questionable, and they didn't look back. They gave the ball to Robertson. So if that is the case here, we're getting 5,500 out of a quarterback that can potentially run the ball a ton. I love it. I know I put him in a few of my builds already. It just comes with a little high risk because of the Daquan Finn factor. If Robertson struggles, we could see them revert back. So that's the only thing you have to. But in GPPs, I think it's a beautiful play. I'm just curious. And I like where you're going here. But Bryson Washington got more of the carries last week. Where Richardson? You got news that he's going to be more heavily involved.
Did Bryson get more carries last week? Let's look.
He had 10 from what I was.
I think Richardson had 15 last week.
Oh, did he? Okay, the one I was looking at had 4. Oh, perfect. Yes. No,
Richardson came into the year as basically the guy, and he was hurt. So the first couple weeks were going a different direction. Yes. But it looks like he's healthy now. He got his most carries last week. They weren't great. I mean, he only had 3 yards per carry, and against Colorado, which is a matchup you should do better than that in. So, I mean, there's definitely some pause for concern from that angle. But again, if you're going to give me the number one running back on the team,
yes,
at 3,100, I'll take it. I'll roll the.
No, I'm not tracking that. It was 4 carries to Utah. That's where I was writing down the other thing. So, looking at the other side, BYU, the only thing Baylor, has not been very good against several things in the past few years, but recently they've kind of tightened things up. So I could see a potential where if you want a little bit of run back, Retzlaff is in play. Good price, has been putting up an average of 21 a game at 7,500, and you're getting about 6 to 7 rushes a game out of him, positive yards for the most point, potential for rushing touchdowns. They have no real true number one RB. So Retzlaff, maybe if you want to pair him up with Chase Roberts, but I think that's a real, I think there's better matchups, but again, you could get that on the cheap for a decent run back with a total that's near 50.
Oh, all right. There you have it. Every week we're going to be interested in Oklahoma State. Their style of play and their talent, right? And they produce a scoring environment that we like for DFS. So Oklahoma State plays Kansas State. I think the main topic for me is going to be Avery Johnson, Kansas State's quarterback. We mentioned him already on this show. This is one of the biggest recruits at quarterback Kansas State's ever gotten. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can run, he can throw. They're going to score points. He hasn't had his breakout game yet this year. This kind of feels like the spot where we get a big Avery Johnson week. I like Avery Johnson a lot. He will be one of my higher owned quarterbacks. I think this is a great scoring environment for him to come out and have a big game with his arms and with his legs. So at 8K, Avery Johnson's going to be a play.
And let's just real quick on that. Remember a very similar quarterback who played Oklahoma State earlier in the year that we love, Taylon Green. They are very similar from Arkansas, and he put up a 40-plus game. He was in winning lineups. Avery Johnson, I love top 2-3 quarterback today. I agree.
Totally agree. And he's due for some scores on the ground. So I'll keep my eye out for that. DJ Giddens is their best player. 8,500 is a little pricey, but he certainly, especially against the Oklahoma State team, has the ability to get there. So he'll be in my player pool. Won't be overweight, but will certainly be in my player pool. And then the guy you want to pair with in this Kansas State team with Johnson is Jace Brown. He's the number one receiver. He hasn't had a big game yet. You get him at 4,800. The price is right. You don't have to stack him with Johnson. You can certainly do Johnson solo. If you want to find a stack, Brown would be the guy I'd be going to.
Yeah, I agree. And from the Oklahoma State side, we had one of those weeks where they finally didn't score a ton. 22-19. I think that's going to change once again this week. 2 weeks ago, Bowman was the guy you needed in your lineups to really get you home with 37.8 points. He has lowest 17 last week. I think that all changes this week. Kansas State, very underwhelming. Got smoked by BYU last week. I thought they'd actually be a potential college football playoff team. So the defense is really what's been letting them down. Yeah, Avery hasn't been great. They only scored 9. I get it. But I think there's a good potential for Oklahoma State to light them up through the air. And I'm going back to Stribling. Stribling's been a roller coaster. 20, then 9, then 37, then 8. So, and it's time to hit the peak again. And we're getting a good price at 5,800. I still think, obviously, Presley's always in play. He's been the more consistent one. I could see a world where we could pair up 2 or 3 receivers in this game. I'm off Ollie Gordon. I just can't right now. It's just too much considering, look, he's 9,200, and I like 3 guys just under him with better matchups. So it's not that I don't like Ollie Gordon. I just don't want to pay 9,200 for him when I think I can get some like Jaden Blue. We're going to talk about later. I can save $2,000 in that matchup. So I prefer the Oklahoma State passing game. What about you?
I agree. I think 9,200 is just simply sometimes too much. Like I'm not saying that's not a good play. I'm more saying he needs to score so many points at 9,200 where it's worth just getting more value and spreading the love out. So I'm with you on that. And the only other guy I want to mention is Rashad Owens. I like trying to zig while everyone else zags. Mm-hmm. People seem to be lowest on Owens. I think this is closer to the 3 of them being even. So if I can get that big of a savings on Owens, Owens was the leading target getter last week. So at 4,500, it feels like he'll also come with a lower ownership. I think Owens is the guy that I'll prioritize in this passing game.
Yeah, I like it. And then for clarity and context, I will play maybe Ollie Gordon. And if I do, I'll play him with Avery Johnson, play both naked. Just that'll be my run back in this game, and I'll ignore the Oklahoma State passing game. But if I'm getting in the passing game, I'm not getting OK State running game. Going back to what we talked about before, I got to get touchdowns out one or the other at these prices. I can't have both.
That makes sense. I'm with you on that. All right, let's look at this Maryland Indiana game. I think this game was interesting. I circled this game earlier in the
Yes.
week. There looks to be. I read something that there could be some weather. Maybe rain and wind. If that's the case, you might want to stay out of this environment if you're scared off by the weather. I'll have to get an updated weather report for today going into the game. Assuming weather is good, I actually like this spot. I think this is a spot that could be a sneaky, high-scoring potential game. Indiana hasn't played anyone, so their defensive metrics look really good. But don't overlook that. They've played a super cupcake schedule so far. They haven't played anyone worth of note. This Maryland offense will be the best offense they've faced by a wide margin. I think this has some back and forth potential. If you guys remember, Curtis Work transferred from Ohio. He was awesome at Ohio. We used to play him all the time when Ohio was playing. He's now at Indiana, and he's got this Indiana team rolling. They've looked really good for the first 4 weeks. I think this is a back and forth game. You can play Rourke. I actually prefer Billy Edwards between the two. I think this Maryland offense is going to find success here, and Billy Edwards is more of a runner than Rourke. So I think you have more potential to get him in the end zone with his legs as well. And we know Billy Edwards comes with one of our favorite receivers, Ty Felton, who we've been talking about all year. At 7,700, he's an example of a guy where I'd rather go to him rather than pay $9K for someone because I think he has just as much upside. Ty Felton is my number one receiver on the day. I will have the most exposure to him. And when I play Edwards, obviously I will pair Felton with Edwards as well.
Averages 10 catches per game. Hasn't scored less than 29.7 in one game. He has scored, over 40, and he's been high 30s in his other two. It's been an amazing year for Ty Felton. Just truly amazing. 5 touchdowns in 4 games. You get one of those, he's upper 20s again because the volume's just going to be there from a catch standpoint. He's averaging 150 yards receiving per game. I can't say nothing. Number one receiver. I agree with you, Joel. And the price is still right. He's not getting priced up there with, Travis Hunter, who's 10-1, 3K more almost with a similar profile, but even less points per game. So, yeah, I'm with you. I like that side. I actually prefer Rourke. I do over Maryland's quarterback there, Billy. So, I just Rourke has just been really, really good. And Maryland tends to let up some yards on that side. That's the place you can get him. Looking there, I'm not sure I'm going to pair him up with anybody. They're both receivers, or he kind of spreads it out. The lowest one there, Williams at 3,900, seems to have some value if you really want to get deep in this game. But I think I might just run him by himself, see what happens. 7,500, I think, is a great price. So 50-point total in this game, better than most of the games we've talked about, except Oklahoma State so far. So I think there's some action, some fireworks.
I will add, I think you're spot on. I am a little interested in Surratt. The one thing I want to highlight is Surratt's the number one guy. They've blown everybody out because they haven't played anybody. So they haven't been throwing for 4 quarters yet this year. And so I think his overall volume has looked tame because of that. I think this will be the most competitive game they've played, and they'll need to go to him the most. So I think this is a spot at 5,500 where he'll have potentially the ability to find a ceiling game.
Yeah, Maryland's given up the second most passing yards per game on this slate. They just bleed yards through the air. So, I got to get him work. And to your point, if I don't want to get too heavy on the receivers, but yeah, one or the other, this right is the best of all of them. And this might be the day, like you said, because he really hasn't played 4 quarters yet. So good point.
All right. We got this Michigan-Minnesota game. Because of Michigan's defense, the way they play, I'm not going to have a ton of experience in most of their games and a ton of exposure to most of their games. I do find there to be an interesting spot that, again, this is one where we'll be zigging while everyone else zags that I don't think many people will be on. I'm very interested in Daniel Jackson on Minnesota. This Minnesota rush defense is very good. You're not going to be able to run the ball on them, but teams have found success through the year on this Michigan team. There have been receivers that have had good games against Michigan. Huge. And Minnesota's going to go to the air, and they're going to go to Jackson. This is their go-to guy. He's the number one option. At only 5K, there's upside here. He's going to get a lot of targets. So I think Daniel Jackson against this Michigan team is very much so in play. I'm going to be a little bit overweight to Jackson because of his pricing, and I think his upside in what's going to be a pretty tough matchup. So Daniel Jackson's the spot that I want to go here. On the other side, it looks like Mullings is running away with this backfield. They still split carries. Mullings looks much better. He was much better the last 2 weeks. Because they split, it's not a smash play. But if I was going to play anyone on the Michigan side, it would be Mullings.
Yeah, I like where your mind's at. Michigan has been really like disappointing, and Warren checks in that one of their star cornerbacks is banged up, questionable for today. So even better for the matchup with Minnesota in the passing game. But in all, this total is 34.5, by far the lowest on the board. I think it goes back to Michigan has no quarterback, and they're going to have to play this game slow. But yeah, I think if anything, I can't. We love Taylor. Taylor's been good, but he'll even burn off some carries here and there. I mean, he hasn't had a ton of like a high value game yet, even though he's popped for 42 in one game. That was because he took 2 long ones to the house. So I don't think I'm getting the running game. If I do anything, I'm with you on Jackson, and that's about it in this game.
All right, I love it. All right, Nebraska, Purdue. I know you mentioned you're interested on the Nebraska side. I'll let you take this game here.
Yeah, I mean, we watched it last week. I mean, I think Notre Dame was up 60 at one point. Purdue is bad, like really bad, and they bleed yards all over the place, rushing, receiving, and he hasn't had one of those games yet. But I think today could be it. So Dylan Raiola, I think at the price point that we're getting in the 6K range to be able to balance out maybe a stud quarterback and a couple stud running backs and some decent receivers, I think we can get there. Raiola hasn't been fantastic yet, but he's been solid. And Nebraska, they finally took their first L last week against Illinois, but there's no shame in that. Illinois is good. They're playing Penn State today. As Adam checked in, said he's looking forward to Penn State, Illinois, 2 top 20 teams. So again, no shame in that. But I love Dylan today. I think he's got a potential to go plus 20, 24, which gets you that 4x value. When you go up there and look at those 9K quarterbacks, Jackson Dart's got to get you 40 to get Raiola's 24. So I really like him. I also like Isaiah Nair. He's really settled in. He's getting almost 20% of the targets. 5,200. I think if you pair them together, I mean, we're talking 11K for those two, and you got to pay 10-1 for Travis Hunter. Yeah, and then if you're going to get away from that, or if you want to play running back, Dowdell has been great. And like I said, Purdue's run defense has been atrocious. I just expect Raiola to run a little bit too. So I don't want to get Raiola, Dowdell, and Naylor. I'll probably do 2 of the 3 and mix it in. But I expect a big day out of Nebraska.
I agree with you. I think this team's going to score points, and there's a variety of options to go to. I like Dowdell at 5,600. I think he's underpriced. He's really just starting to take over the backfield. If he continues that trend and he gets 20 carries today, I think he's due for a big day. The other guy that I just want to mention is Jamal Banks, 3,900. This is a clear mispricing. He had 8 catches last week. I mean, he's a number 1 receiver potential. If you guys remember week 1, he was priced in the 9K. Now, that was obviously a mistake, but now they have him in the 3Ks is a wild reversal. In terms of 3K guys with upside, Jamal Banks is one of my favorite potential plays. So I will definitely be overweight to Banks this week as well.
Yeah, great point. And yeah, I'm glad you're on the same page, Warren. Like something we talked about pre-show, Nebraska really I'm really drawn to them today, especially with this matchup. And I think they're going to be under-owned based upon some of the other games. I mean, a 47-point total is not going to have people run into this game, but I think we have some value here.
The other thing that before we get off this game, I want to add is especially with Edgerrin out, he's not great, but he's a number 1 receiver. I think that makes Max Clare get more targets. Again, he's under 4K. This isn't the most explosive Purdue team, but I think with the role that he'll have under 4K, Max Clare is in play.
And I watched that Notre Dame game, and he was getting a ton of targets, but it got to a point it was so bad that they just kind of like pulled him off the sidelines and didn't let him play a quarter or 2. So that's his only game day he's underperformed under 10 points. So, I mean, a guy under 4K that's averaging 12, yeah, I like it.
Boom. All right. We head over to these afternoon games. We start with Arkansas, Texas A&M. You guys will laugh at us because we talk about Taylor Green every week.
Yeah.
We love Taylor Green on this show, and that's not going to change today. I love Taylor Green today. It's his style of play. He's a running back and a quarterback all in one. He struggled a little bit last week, even though he came out hot in the first quarter against Auburn. They really slowed him down as the game went on. But playing in Auburn is going to look a lot different than playing in Texas A&M. And Texas A&M is a good team, but Auburn's defensively a much more traditionally stronger, bigger team. I think things open back up for Arkansas and Green today against this A&M team. and I like both sides. This is one of my favorite game environments of the day. I can't imagine there's a world where Texas A&M puts Connor Wegman back in for Marcel Reed after they've won 2 games in a row and Marcel Reed has looked really good. So even if Wegman's healthy, I think he's coming off the bench. I think it's Marcel Reed's start. And Marcel Reed, again, is a dual threat quarterback. He runs the ball, he throws the ball. At 7K with getting that dual threat upside in a matchup that Arkansas is good against the run, not as good against the pass. If they're not going to be able, if Texas A&M is going to struggle handing the ball off to Moss, they might try and get Reed going with his legs more. I think there's a lot to like about this game environment. So 2 of my favorite quarterbacks of the day are going to come from this game between Green and Reed.
Yeah, I agree. Both are very active. I'm so like, I don't know what they're going to do with Wagner because, we've heard he's NFL talent. We heard, big arm, but guy can't stay healthy. And like you said, they got a little momentum going. I mean, you should beat Bowling Green by a little more than 6, but it's a freshman and he's learning and he's playing well. So I'm with you. I see they got to stick with Reed. And if they do, I think it's a very nice matchup for him against Arkansas. I think this game could go way over the total. Like you said, we're looking at 50.5, a -6, so under a touchdown point spread. So we could definitely see some good back and forth. I like this as a game environment. And the one guy I'm sure we all have our eyes on is Jaquindon Jackson. Texas A&M is okay against the rush, but not great. So I think there's some opportunity here. And the beauty of Jaquindon is, he's active in the pass game. He hasn't had a ton this year, but the few he's had, he's been able to break off. They had a few holding penalties that took away some of his catches in his OK State. So his numbers are down, but 8 TDs on the year is the key. He's had 8 TDs in 4 games. So who's getting the ball down near the goal line. It's Jaquindon Jackson. So I like him a lot too.
I'm with you on Jackson. I think he's all upside. He'll be in my top 3 or 4 backs of the day for sure. I think it's a really good spot for him. Before we get out of here, I want to touch on some of these receivers. There's a few guys in this game that I like a lot. I'll start with A&M. I think Noah Thomas is a value, is one of my favorite plays. He's been hurt to start the year. He came back last week, led the team in targets. He's a deep threat. Arkansas is, again, they're a funnel defense. They're good against the run. They're not good against the pass. The receivers had big games. If Noah Thomas is the top target at 4,200, this is a value play with upside that I'll be targeting. Noah Thomas will be one of my favorite receivers of the day to get into my lines because of the matchup. And on the other side of the ball, I think people are sleeping on Andrew Armstrong. He took a big hit early in the game last week. I think that slowed him down. If you kind of look before last week, he had a few monster games. He's the go-to guy on this Arkansas receiving core, and this Texas A&M has given up some big passing games. So this is a spot where you can exploit them. I want to get Armstrong in my lineups. I will be heavily invested in Armstrong. I will also look at some of these secondary options. Sategna has gotten involved. He's had a lot of targets at 3,800 because of the price. I'll stack him in a few lineups with Green. And as we know, every week, Luke Haas, 3,100. If you need someone that low, he's always a guy in play. Last week, Bowling Green's tight end went up for like 150 yards against them. So the tight end position is something they're susceptible to. Luke Haas would be a value play as well.
Yeah, Armstrong is still getting 11.3 targets a game, which is 4th on the slate, only behind Felton, Harris, and Hunter. So, yeah, I like him a lot. I'm with you. And, even much so, one-off game doesn't speak everything. 26% of the target, targets from Green. So he's really, he's who he goes to. Haas, I want him 3,100. It's going to happen again. He's going to do it. I just don't know when. So, play it light. That's where I'm going to be. But definitely, he's interesting. We've mentioned a couple of 3K guys right now. You said it earlier with Dominic Richardson, at running back. You mix in 1 or 2 of these. Don't put 2 3Ks in the lineup, but you mix them in different lineups. You can start to afford some of these high-priced players today. So I like that name, Luke Haas, and it's something to keep an eye on.
All right. As we shift over, we have the TCU Kansas game. This is another interesting game environment. This Kansas team is interesting. They like to run the ball. Jalen Daniels has been disappointing to date, but it's a matchup that you want to get right against this TCU team who is very explosive. They air it out. They run a lot of plays. I am interested in Josh Hoover. 8,500 is expensive. It'd be your top guy, yes, but he's had some monster games. They are airing the ball, throwing the ball all over the field. And you can patch him with Jack Beck, who is like a tight end hybrid. who's just been dominant to start the year. At 7,200, I'm willing to pay up and get some exposure to Beck. I also like Eric McAllister. He's a transfer from Boise State. We loved him at Boise State last year. He finally had a big game last week. I think he's kind of integrating himself more into this offense. So McAllister would be my second option here at under 5K. I'd look for on the TCU side. On the Kansas side, Neal's obvious. Neal's going to be chalk because he's underpriced here, and they're just going to feed him the ball. I'm going to eat the chalk. I'm going to play him. I'll have my exposure to Neal because the price is right, and this just seems like a really good game environment for him. And if you want to get some exposure in the passing game, Grimm has become the guy, so he'd be the guy I'd look to on this side. But I'm not going to prioritize the Kansas passing game.
Yeah, well, Grimm was in a lot of winners last week. He had another good one, looking at 31 points. So 5,200, they're just not adjusting to Grimm. I'm with you. The problem with Grimm, and it's not Grimm, it's just Daniels has been bad. He's turning the ball over a ton, but he's getting enough targets at 5,200. He's in that 5K range we talked about before the show, Joel, of receivers that I could get with if I want to play, like even just by himself in this game, and I might. But to your point, Devin Neal, top 2-3 running back for me, over 100 yards every game this season. TCU, 99th in the nation in rush defense, average letting up almost 180 a game. So I think it is a Devin Neal day, and I'm stunned. I mean, I look at here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th rated or salary running back on the slate today. It's just the price is right. You're right. It's going to be a very popular spot. But I'm okay with the popular spot if we get the others right. So, yeah, I'm in on Neal, Grimm, and I think this is a good game environment as well.
All right. Boom. Next up, we have this Colorado UCF game. This one is a really interesting one for us to talk about because from a total standpoint, from a game environment standpoint, this might be the best game on the slate, right? This might be the number one target. From a pricing standpoint, we have issues, right? We can't play everyone in this game because the prices doesn't make sense. And if you try and squeeze everyone in, you just can't afford to make a lineup that is coherent. So, while you want to get some exposure to this game, be careful not to force it because you just can't build a lineup by playing all these super expensive guys. Shedeur at 9,500. Shedeur is great. Shedeur is going to get you probably 30 points, but you play him at 9,400, it limits the rest of your lineup. KJ Jefferson, could be a ceiling game. He hasn't been great. I haven't seen the best version of KJ Jefferson this year. I prefer the run game, so I'm going to be off at KJ Jefferson. The priority will be Harvey, who's been, explosive. They feed him the ball at 8,900. I'd rather spend that up on Harvey here. And in the passing game on the Colorado side, Kobe Hudson's the guy at 7,300. There's just other guys I'd rather pay up for at the spot, so I won't be overweight there. And then you got to look on the Colorado side. It's just the pricing. I think they're in a good spot. I think these guys will score a lot of points, but I can't afford Hunter at 10K. It's just too much. Maybe Will Shepherd if you want to get different. He's been involved at 3,800, but he's certainly not a smash play for me.
Yeah, it's a great game. 62 points total, and we just see it. These for Colorado, you just have to get to the point. They're just never going to run the ball. And if they do, it's just going to be run for show, pass for dough. It's just that's what they are. And so we got to get involved in that passing game. Omarion Miller is interesting. He came out and spiked last week with 2 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. But I'm not sure I trust that. I actually think my favorite is Jonte Webster. He's been really involved in the passing game, averaging about 5 catches per game. Averaging 16 points. So I think at 5,900, he's a nice little fallback, like half the price, a little more than that of Hunter. I think that's where I'm going to land when I get in this Colorado game. And like you said, I think I'm off Jefferson. I have too much PSD from Jefferson or post-trauma. I'm sorry, disorder. Last year he would suit up, then go out, suit up, then go out. Now this year he's playing, but he just – man, he's a guy I just don't want to get in, especially 8,900. But Harvey, no doubt about it. That was a huge game last week, 29 carries when they need him. And versus a bad Colorado team, they're going to need him. I think they're going to lean on him today. So Harvey for me, Webster's 2. I'll mix in some of the other guys, but it's going to be hard to afford more than 3 of these.
I'm with you on that for sure.
And a quick question, Warren asked about, does Jalen come back to 2022 for? I think no. I think he's shown that. Like, he is just turnover prone right now. Something's in his head. Kansas is a mess, though I do think they win today. That's another aside. But, blowing that game with the weird weather delay last week. Yeah, I don't think he comes all the way back. Is he worth playing? Absolutely, against TCU. He's worth playing, but I'm not sure he comes back to 2022.
I agree with you. I'm at the point with him where it's more of a let's wait and see. If he comes back and shows it, maybe in the future we'll play him. Until I see it, I can't play him.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be out on him there. We'll move over to this Louisville Notre Dame game. Listen, you like Riley Leonard. I know you mentioned it earlier in the show. Riley Leonard is a pure example of you don't need to throw for 300 yards to get there as a quarterback. Riley Leonard can get you there as a running back, and if he throws for 1 touchdown, that's just gravy on top. So I'll let you guide us through this game, and I know you'll start with Leonard.
Yeah, Leonard, I mean, he's averaged 37 points the last 2 weeks. They've really, after that terrible loss to Northern Illinois, they revamped their offense in the way they're going to attack. They're not going to go through there. His first 2 games this season, 30 attempts, 32 attempts. The last 2, a combined 41, average of 20. They just said, forget it. You're not the passer we thought you were. We're not going to get involved this way. We're not going to Sam Hartman you. We're going to just hand you the ball and run some design scripted runs. And that has worked miracles as, on the season, he has 1 passing touchdown. But on the season, he has 6 rushing touchdowns. He's been huge in a rushing game, averaging 121 yards in the past 2 weeks. And I think that goes well this week against Louisville. They haven't, it's showing that they're decent against the run, but it's different when you have these quarterback design runs. And Notre Dame has a great offensive line. So I love Riley Leonard. Once again, he's a guy I love, I'm going to say 2 words in a row. I love too. I've always liked him, but I'm probably off him because Louisville's defensive front against running backs, but I like Riley Leonard a lot. And then, of course, I guess DraftKings has started to smarten up a little bit, right, on the Louisville side. Brooks is still undervalued, though. I mean, last week, I think, what was he, 4,800? We've only gotten up to 5,700. Ja'Cory Brooks has been fantastic, and I think he will continue to be once again. So those are the 2. This game's hard to love a game environment when you're going to play the slow-paced game Notre Dame does. So Leonard, Brooks, and that's about the shows a little bit in play, but I think that's too tough of a defense to score against.
I was going to ask you, does Notre Dame's defense scare you off from Brooks at all?
A little bit, it does, but in the end, I think there's some potential there. They're going to have to move the ball some way, and Louisville just relies on Brooks so heavily that I think he'll still see the targets. They'll move him around.
I'm with you on that. All right. Wisconsin, USC. People like a bounce back effort from USC today to get right, score a lot of points. Their pricing is affordable.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people will be on the USC side. If I'm going to target USC, I think I prefer Marks. If you guys remember, the guy here is Woody Marks. He's Jaquavius Marks from Mississippi State, and all those years he's transferred. What's interesting about Marks is he's basically a receiver and a running back. He could lead the team in targets as well as rushing. So at 7,100, because of his usage, I think Marks is squarely in play here. And I also think Zachariah Branch, who's pretty easily USC's number 1 receiver, is a little bit underpriced at only $5K. I think he can get loose and get you a ceiling game as well. Those will be my main targets on the USC side. On Wisconsin, it's Will Pauling, who's the number 1 receiver, again, under 5K. He can get you 8 catches. So it's the sheer volume for Pauling that makes him attractive. Who are you looking at in this game, Dave?
I think that's it. I think Zacharias Branch is probably my number 1. I mean, you mentioned with the running back there. Marks is probably the best, but I just think I can get some other 7, 8K guys. I'll play him a little bit, but at the 5K range, going back to that stuff we talked about, there's some really good 5K range here. Pauling and Branch are 2 of them. Pauling, I mean, they got smoked by Bama last week, but he still gets 9 catches versus great defense. So in a game when they're probably going to have to score some points like they were trying to do against Bama, I think Pauling is a very, very good play today. One of my favorites, actually, at 4,800. So, yeah, Branch, Pauling, Marks, and I'm happy. I don't think I'm in on Moss at all.
I'm with you on that. Even though it does look like he'll carry a good amount of ownership. All right, Auburn, Oklahoma. This game is a battle to me of 2 defenses. 2 strong defenses, not a great pace. This is not better game on paper to watch than it is to play DFS. I have an easy one for you. Zero exposure for me in this game. How about you, Dave?
I got one.
All right.
Well, you know what? I'm going to say I actually have two, and one of I think Auburn's going back to Peyton Thorne, right? And he was atrocious. I think they don't even let him, mess up today. I think this is a huge Jarquez Hunter game. Tons of, we've already seen, 48 carries this year. But more importantly, in the last 3 games, he's averaged about 16. So I think we're over 20 today at 6,300. Yes, Oklahoma's been pretty good against running backs, but don't forget they've played some stiffs like Temple. And I think we got a shot here for Jarquez Hunter to have a huge game because they're just going to try and grind this thing out and not let Thorne lose it. And on the other side, I'm always been a fan. He hasn't been, great yet, but he's getting the volume in the catch game. That's Bauer Sharp, the tight end at 3,700 on Oklahoma. He's only had 1 game under 4 receptions. So we're talking a guy that's under 4K that's probably going to average somewhere in the 5-6 target range. He pops one of those for a touchdown. We're 12-13, and we're got another really good value play. So in a game where points are going to be premium, tight ends can often pop on the chart. So yeah, I like Sharp and I like Branch.
I think it's a good call.
Or Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah, Sharp get pretty involved for somebody under 4K. So interesting guy to take a shot on. I like it. Last game on the slate, one that will carry some interest for sure. Arch Manning, maybe probably a little disappointing last week. The total in this game and the spread is almost like flabbergasted. You're like, whoa, they're favored by how many points against Mississippi State? This isn't a 1AA team. This is like an SEC school. So Texas is expected to blow them out and score a ton of points. I think they try and get Arch Manning comfortable. I'm okay with paying up for Arch Manning in this spot because I think he can score with his legs. I think they're going to try and let him show out against a pretty bad Mississippi State defense. So I like Arch Manning, but my favorite play here is Jaden Blue, Texas's top running back. I think he's going to have his way today. At 7,400, I think the price is right. There's some guys I would compare him to in the 8K range, so you get some value there. And then in the receiver side, Isaiah Bond's their number 1 receiver at 4,800 with the amount of points they're projecting him to score. They're expecting him to march up and down the field. I feel like he's underpriced. So I'll be overweight to Bond as well.
I like all those. I love Blue today. I think you got to play Blue. The biggest fear of this game is the 37.5 point spread. How long do these guys keep going? Like you said, I think they go long enough to get you the points you need. And we saw Mississippi State get shredded by Graham Mertz and Florida. And they're just terrible. Take a flyer on Ryan Wingo. The receiver he's a young kid. He's already had 9 catches this year for 239 yards, 2 touchdowns. Has had, I think, 3 of his 4 games are in double digits. At 3,700, that's too much volume for me to ignore. So I like Ryan Wingo as well. Like you said, Bond's great, but I think Wingo's worth the look. And then Matthew Golden as well. So this Texas receiver game is wide open. It really is. I do think they try and get Arch to, get some confidence rolling here. So pick 1 or 2. Don't get too heavy on the Texas passing game, but I think we could get lucky with some value receivers here.
I think I'm with you. We didn't even talk about this before, but Wingo was one of the guys I highlighted as well.
Yeah.
That might be something too. Wingo might just be like, he might have a special connection with Manning, right? Manning came in, found him, got him the ball. That could be something Manning looks for him. The other thing is at 3,700, he's a big play guy. He doesn't need 10 catches to get there. If he gets you 2 big catches, that's enough to get value at 3,700. So Wingo I like, especially in this game we're expecting a blowout. He doesn't need to play 4 quarters. 2 big plays could get you there.
No, and he's averaged 19 points in the last 2 games with Arch. They won those games 107-10. So they blew those last 2 teams out in UTSA, ULM, and he still averaged 20 points a game. And then that would get you back 6x on your value. Like, yeah, I think he's going to be heavily owned. Don't get me wrong, but he's definitely a pivot that will help you afford some of these big guys we've talked about.
Boom. All right. That's a wrap for the game by game. Before we get you out of here, we are going to go through our pick'em plays on Underdog. Before we start that, don't forget to smash the like button. Give us a follow. It goes a long way. If you haven't done it already, sign up for Win Daily. You get in the Discord. We have updates all day. We talk about the afternoon games, the night games. There's bets thrown in there. as the name says, we win daily, get involved, get in part of the crew, and show us those green screens. Before we let the people out of here today, Dave, who do you like in the pick'em market?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have, a specialist we have listed up there on the banner at the bottom. Win Daily 100 on Underdog Fantasy. We're going to go over some of those, spots we like today. But you can get up $1,000 deposit match. I'm sorry, using that code Win Daily 100. So circle it, highlight it if you want to get in there and play some, daily fantasy with just some player props. That's where I play. So, yeah, let's get into it. And then one of the first ones I highlighted, and I said it early on, he looks like Taylor Green. He plays like Taylor Green. He runs the ball a lot. He's not great at passing. Let's go Avery Johnson, over 62.5 rushing yards. I've been picking a quarterback each week in the rushing yard market. It's been Garrett Green in the past few weeks, and he's hit. So I like this. It's a lot. 62.5 is a lot. But versus Oklahoma State, I'm in.
I like it. I like 16.5. This does seem like the spot, so I'm going to tell you on that pick. And then you mentioned it, so I might as well go right in. Taylor Green. I mean, you said it yourself. Taylor Green's one of my favorite quarterbacks in the country. I think he's got a good matchup here against A&M. 67 rushing yards, 67.5 rushing yards for him. I'm going to take the over there. They get him moving with his legs. That's the best part of their offense. I think he passes 67.5 yards today.
All right. I'm just going to do it. Like I said earlier, Purdue's bad in so many areas, and I love a lot of the Nebraska stacks today. But the one I probably like the most, there's some risk. There's Dylan Raiola with the 230.5 passing yards, 233.5 rush passing plus rushing. Last week I had -50 rushing. But I think that's a little bit of an oversight just because they were going against a good defense. He's not going to get sacked. He's not going to have these problems today. We saw Riley Leonard go for 140. I'm going to take that combination there of over 233.5 passing plus rushing yards for Raiola.
All right. I love it. For me, I'm going to go with I'm going to stick with my Arkansas team. I think I'm becoming an Arkansas fan. I'm on them every week.
Or whatever they say. Yeah.
But for me, it's going to be Andrew Armstrong, the receiver. I'm going to go with over 66.5 receiving yards. He's the number one guy. I think they find some success through the air today as well. So Andrew Armstrong over 66.5.
Love it. So that's a wrap for us on Underdog and some of the bets. So let us know how you do. One bet I'm really looking at today too, some light favorites in the game. Kansas has been terrible this year. I think they're 1-3 overall, -2. I like them at home to rebound. I think they're too good of a team. And then my other thing, this spread just smells to me. Auburn favored by 1.5 points over Oklahoma. With all the problems Auburn's had on the offensive side, giving games away like to Cal, they're favored. This tells me something. Give me Auburn -1.5 in the betting market. You like anything in the betting market?
I'm not overweight to anything today. I'm definitely more intrigued in the DFS side than betting on the games outright. But keep an eye on the Alabama game. I mean, obviously that's the game of the day. That's what we're all looking for. I do think Georgia's the better team, but I think Alabama's going to come out and win today. So I'm going to look to take Alabama to beat Georgia today.
I'm with you there too. I just think Kalen DeBoer needs to make a statement in the SEC. There's a lot of things on the line for him today where, Georgia can get one slip up and have no problem getting back. We talked about it before the show. Alabama, they have, look, I'm going to pull it up now. Their schedule gets a little slippery coming up. We've seen how good Tennessee looks. They got Tennessee and Missouri coming up in mid-October. Both are top 11 teams. Then they got LSU at 14. They got to go to Oklahoma. They still have their big rival with Auburn. Like 4 or 5 trippy spots they got to win today. I mean, Alabama with 3 losses, like you said, might still get in the college football playoffs. They don't want to be ranked like 11 or 12 and have to play Oregon or someone, really tough like that. So I think it's a bigger game for Alabama today. I'm with you. Stakes
are high. Big Saturday, mid-season form. Keep us posted how you do. Follow us on Twitter. Show us your green screen. Show us if you get some wins. We'll come back next week. We'll crown some good plays, and we'll do it again. Good luck today. See you next week.